Welcome to the No Guilt Fangirls podcast, where liking what you like is never a bad thing. Here's your host and head fangirl in charge, Patty Holiday.
Hey y'all, welcome to the No Guilt Fangirls podcast. I'm Patty Holiday, your head fangirl in charge, and this is the Monday Movie Minute for July 29th. Now, every Monday, we talk about the movies, what came out, what we saw last week, and what's happening at the box office. This week, I got back to the theater. Last week, I didn't. There was way too much going on that kept me at home. But this week, I saw 3 movies in the box office, and I liked each of them in different ways for different reasons. And when I tell you the names of the movies, you're going to be like, oh yeah, that's a total random assortment of movies to go see. But hey, I like it all. I like the variety, I guess. Okay, so this week we are talking about Crawl, The Farewell, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But first, we're going to talk about box office. In the number 1 spot, again, is The Lion King. Number 2 is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which actually had over $40 million in the opening weekend, which is the biggest for a Quentin Tarantino movie. And we'll talk about Tarantino here in a minute and why this matters. Spider-Man Far From Home is in the 3rd spot. Toy Story 4 is in the 4th spot. Crawl, Yesterday, Aladdin, Stuber, Annabelle Comes Home. And then, guys, in the number 10 spot is The Farewell. I think this is huge. And I'll tell you why. The Farewell was only out in 135 theaters nationwide. That's not a lot. You're not going to find this movie in every single theater. You might have to, if you want to go see it, you're going to have to look around. I think that's changing. I think they are actually opening to a wider amount of theaters this week. But it's been interesting because they did a very slow build. Like, I think first it was in a handful of theaters. I mean, I live in the greater Washington, D.C. area, and there was nothing around me when this movie first opened. I couldn't see it. I had to wait until this weekend where it opened up to some place that was my normal theater. So interesting. But I think that's because this one's getting a lot of buzz, and I'll get into the why. But first, we're going to start with Crawl, and that's because it's been out the longest. Now, personally, I wasn't sure I wanted to even see this movie because I've heard it was described as Jaws in a basement. And guys, I just don't do sharks. I don't like sharks. It's a whole long story. And I have issues. I have issues with Jaws. And I'm not even joking. I'm not exaggerating. I can't do sharks. So, and gators, while they're not sharks, they have a lot of the same properties, big teeth, jumping at you, trying to kill you, just those things. I don't do gators really either. They kind of freak me out. They are a very interesting species. And, I don't like them. Anyway, so I wasn't sure how I felt about going into this one, but it was a slow Tuesday. I had my AMC A-list movies to use. So I went ahead and saw it. And, guys, it wasn't terrible. I mean, there's definitely worse movies out right now. There is a full parent movie review on noguiltfangirl.com if you want to go check that out and see if this is something you or your family is interested in seeing. I will tell you this, though, to sum it up. It's not that much language, which surprised me, because if there were killer gators swarming my rapidly flooding house, I am going to let all the F-bombs fly all over the place and feel no guilt about that at all, because, gators swimming through my house trying to eat me, you can bet some words are going to be said. As far as kids and family, and just to kind of give you an idea, there's no sex, there's no nudity, there's a lot of jump scares. The biggest issue is obviously going to be the violence and the gore, because it's got some moments of massive ooh going on. 5 gators, 1 man, crazy overhead shot, you get the idea. So like I said, there's worse out there. And I would totally let my two older teens go see this one if they wanted to. It's an interesting story. It tries to also be a family dynamic story between a daughter and her dad and kind of what has gone on with them growing up and their estrangement. But that definitely takes a back seat to what this is about, which is gators in your face, like all the time. The repetition of fights, I guess, was my biggest issue. But I'm really not sure how you can make fighting off a gator new every single time, especially when you're confined in a crawl space for like most of the movie. Also, the ending is like super abrupt. You get your ending, you get your scene, and then it fades to black and you hear, "See you later, alligator." Like, that's the song that they play at the end, which, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, ha, they're so cute. Oh, but I did not get that song out of my head for hours afterwards. And neither will you. All right, but overall, I'd give it a 6 to a generous 7 on a scale of 1 to 10. It wasn't bad. I was mostly entertained. Now, on to The Farewell. This is Awkwafina's family drama that I've actually been looking forward to for a few weeks. I know I've mentioned it on previous episodes. I saw the trailer. It brought me almost to tears, and I was so surprised because I adore Awkwafina in her comedic roles. And this one, she gets a couple of small, laughs, but it's not a comedy, absolutely not a comedy. And she's not playing a funny character. So it's very different for her. It opened, like I said earlier, in just, 1 or 2 theaters. Exaggeration, I'm sure it was more than that. But, not very many. And then finally it opened up wider. And look, it made the top 10 in box office this weekend, which I just think that's crazy. I think it's cool. So what is this movie about? Billy, she is Awkwafina. She is a struggling young adult in New York City. I think she's like right around 30s is what her mom mentions at one point. She's in New York City. She struggles with money, with her career, with school, all of those things. She also has her parents, her Chinese immigrant parents, live in the same city with her, and she visits them as a good child would, of course, to get her laundry done and have her mom cook her meals. But there's also that tension there. You can tell with being the only child, to these parents. But there's also love. There's also clearly they all love each other. Families, were complicated that way. So the biggest issue here, though, is that the family gets rocked with this news about their nene, the grandma over in China. She's sick. She has maybe 3 months left to live. The family is going to gather to say goodbye, but they're not going to actually tell her that she's dying. So they're coming for a wedding, and they let her plan the wedding and celebrate this marriage. The whole time, nobody is saying anything about why they're all really there. And I think they said it's been 25 years since the whole family has been together. So yeah, it's a big momentous occasion, and it's really heavy because everyone's uncomfortable and everyone is sad, but they're supposed to be there for this happy wedding. And so it's very odd. It's an interesting thing. The first thing that you see on screen when this movie opens, it says that this is based on an actual lie, because apparently this is very common. This is something that happens in the East. Is the family burdens themselves with the news of cancer or somebody dying, rather than burdening the patient, because that they're taking that role on. They're going to take that burden off, and they just don't. So they don't tell them if they're that sick, which is fascinating. Now, Billy and her father, to an extent, her father's, he doesn't go against the family, and he does say, "Billy, I can't go against the family," but they are the two that have internal conflicts and fight with this Chinese custom to keep the news of her illness from their grandma, from the dad's mom. In China, it's like I said, it's a good thing for the family to carry it, and they both are very conflicted about that the entire time. In the East, you're part of a whole, of a family, of a society. It's you are part of the whole, where, in the West, our life belongs to ourselves, right? So it's just a very, very different way of thinking, and there's that conflict there. Now, the question is, should your kids go see this movie? Is this something that I can say as a parent movie review that is it safe for kids? Will they like it? That sort of thing. Now, absolutely, it's kid-friendly in the sense of my usual criteria. I think it's got one swear word, which I didn't even catch, but my friend who was next to me watching the movie said she heard it. So one swear word, whatever. No sex, no violence, no nudity. Nothing like to shield your kid from, except the death of the grandma, right? The sadness and the heaviness, and that they're all lying to this grandma. There is a lot of drinking and smoking. However, so if you don't, like your family to see that is in this movie. So the whole family, decides to basically lie to the grandma and shield her from the fact that she's going through this. So it's safe for your kids to see it on those levels, but at the same time, do they need to see it? Do they want to see it? I'm going to lean towards no, unless you have a very, your child, know your kid. But I put it in perspective with my two oldest children, my two youngest children. There's no way they would be bored out of their minds. They would have no interest in this. In addition, you either need to know Mandarin Chinese, or you need to be able to read to even understand the movie, because it's subtitled for like 90% of this movie. So that's the other thing. I don't know why I was surprised that it was basically all in Chinese, but I wasn't prepared. Again, very American of me. I assumed Aquafina that it would be more English, but it's not. It's absolutely not. It's in Chinese with a little bit of English thrown in. So keep that in mind too. My two older kids, I don't think my son would really have any interest in it. If I made him sit and watch it, he'd be like, all right, I'll watch it, but he wouldn't. This is not something he would choose. My daughter would probably just be a puddle of tears the entire time, because she's such an empath, and she would be Billy. She would just be so upset that we aren't telling grandma, we aren't helping grandma. Why aren't we helping grandma? The family is helping grandma, but they're helping her in their way, not our way. So overall, I'm going to skip it for my family, because I don't think they would enjoy it as an entertainment source at this point in time. But I can see my daughter watching it later and really liking it. There's just not a lot of action at all that goes on. It's pretty mellow, and there's kind of this overall sadness, obviously, that courses through the entire movie. So, while I can't say that this movie is for kids, I will say it is a family movie. It will teach you and make you think about your own family dynamic and what would you do in a situation like this. And, it was an interesting discussion to have afterward with my friend, how our families would respond to this. And, so I mean, there's definitely a lot to talk about from this movie, and I do like it. But I'd say go see it, adults, but probably keep the kids at home. All right, and finally, the biggest movie of the weekend, and I got a little obsessed with it, I will admit, so you can tell already, I really liked it, because when I like something, that's what I do. I get obsessed with it. I've been thinking about it all weekend long. I've been talking about it all weekend long. And this is the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is Quentin Tarantino's ninth movie, I think. And I don't know a lot about Quentin Tarantino in the sense that I'm not a big fan. I don't follow him super, super closely, but my understanding is this is a big deal because he's going to only do 10 and then he's retiring or something along those lines. So we don't have a lot left with Quentin out there. But I will say overall, as somebody who does not care for the most part for the things that he does in his movies, I really liked this movie. I loved Pulp Fiction, but I saw that when I was way much younger. And I just remember it being such a crazy pants movie, but the things that were crazy about it is also what made me uncomfortable enough that I saw it twice, and then I will never see that movie again. It's brilliant. I remember all that, and it still sticks with me. A lot of those scenes are still with me, which says a lot about the power of that movie. But it's just not the form of entertainment that I enjoy anymore. So I went into Once Upon a Time in Hollywood with a little bit of reservation. However, I love Hollywood. I love old Hollywood. I love the 60s and 70s of Hollywood. I had to see this movie just even for the visuals and for the locations and the time period setting of it all. I was in love with it from that aspect almost from the beginning. So this one is, I'd say it's equal parts like super Tarantino with some of his signature things that he puts in the film, like apparently showing women's feet is a Tarantino thing. Ew. It's their dirty feet, like all over the place. There's a lot of scenes like that. It's gross and dumb, but if you are a Quentin Tarantino person, you know this and you accept it, I guess. I don't know. There are feet, of course, in this movie, but it's also kind of non-Tarantino-ish in the sense that the other movies that I have seen of his had a lot more violence throughout the entire movie, and it's always shocking and it's always, very graphic. This one really didn't have much. There's some fights, but nothing super out of, super crazy out of the ordinary until the last 20-ish, 30-ish minutes or so of the movie. And then it rocks and rolls and it's insane. It's insane, guys. It's absolutely insane. But up until then, I would say I was surprised. The whole time I kept thinking, where's this movie going? What is happening? I wasn't bored. I wasn't annoyed. I just couldn't see the point, where were we getting to the whole point of this? And then finally, bam, there it was. When it happens fast and it rocks and rolls and it was mind blowing and it was crazy. So what is this movie about? It's 1969 in Hollywood, and that's the setting of this film. Rick Dalton, which is Leonardo DiCaprio, has been star of Westerns, and he has a stunt double who is also his BFF, and his name is Cliff Booth, and that's played by Brad Pitt. They're basically coming to terms with the fact that their Hollywood careers, as they once knew it, is over. They're not changing with the times. They are still stuck kind of in this past. Cliff has accepted it way more easily than poor Rick Dalton, who is really struggling with this whole idea. Rick lives up in up in Hollywood, and his neighbor happens to be Sharon Tate. Now, here's the thing. If you're like, who's Sharon Tate? I don't know who Sharon Tate is. Then do a little Google, do a little research, find out before you go see this movie. Otherwise, it will make no sense to you. You will think it's stupid. You won't get why so many of us are so blown away by this story. You do need to know a little bit about her history and about the Manson family. Charles Manson. Okay. You don't need to know the details. This is not a Manson family movie. It's not, all about that, but they do factor in to this story. And so if you know a little bit about it, you're going to be way less confused and you'll understand the brilliance, I guess, of all of this. So, at least know who they were, what crimes were committed, hint, hint, Sharon Tate, and go from there, okay? That being said, as I've talked about this a little bit, is this something that is okay for kids? I would absolutely let my oldest son see this one without reservation. I actually brought him downstairs after I saw the movie. I came in the house and I was like, hey, I got a question for you. Do you know who Charles Manson was? And he knew a little bit. He doesn't know details because he's 16. He did know the basics. And so knowing that, I was like, if for some reason he wanted to see this, I would probably let him see it. On the scale of things, there's a ton of language. There's sex that's talked about, but nothing visual, no nudity, nothing like that on the scene. But they do talk about sex a lot. Lots of language, and probably only the last 20 minutes is that crazy, violent third act that does happen. I would be willing to accept that if he really wanted to go see it. He shrugged his shoulders at me like he didn't care. So I don't think we're going to have that problem. But I would probably let them go. Most people probably would not. This is definitely a rated R. It's Tarantino. Of course it's rated R. But that's just where I was in this. The acting in this movie was fantastic. Leo and Pitt and Robbie were all mesmerizing. I enjoyed all three actors, and I can't say that I am a huge fan of any of them. I am not one of those people that love everything that Brad Pitt does. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. Leo DiCaprio, for the most part, I like most things that he does, but I'm not one of those, I love Leo, I'm not a stan. But in this movie, I thought all three of them were really great. And Margot Robbie made Sharon Tate this very likable, very adorable, very sweet character. I have no idea if that's what she was really like, but I was rooting for her, which I think is also on purpose and is what made what happens there at the end this crazy, mind-blowing thing. I could even see a lot of nominations coming out when award season rolls around for these three characters. All three of them. I can see it. Now, this movie is long, and the pacing is problematic. For the first 2 hours, there's absolutely, moments of boredom. I wrote down in my parent movie review, which is also on noguiltfangirl.com, I always write down when you can pee during movies, because I think that's important. There's a lot of places where you can get up and go and you're not missing too much in this movie because it's just so long and kind of slow. It was funny in parts, but there are some racial punchlines that I think were put in for the purpose of getting a laugh. And, they weren't there to serve any real purpose or to make you think or to be ironic even. I don't know. I think they were just there to get a laugh. And they got a laugh in my theater, which I was super uncomfortable with and I didn't love. I could have done without those parts of the movie. Look, I know it's set in the 60s. I know people talked a lot differently back then. Leo's character is actually an actor who plays in these movies that are set in the 1800s and they're Westerns. And so they're even farther set back in our PC ways. But it's just, I don't know, it's just not a good look in 2019 to repeat those lines for laughs in my point of view. All right, so there is this full movie review on the blog for this one. Plus, I added a list of all the Hollywood cameos. Think movies, actors, locations. It's a big list. It's a long list. But if you're curious about who was what and what was going on, that's also a very Tarantino thing, as he tucks these Easter eggs, I guess, into movies, as well as he reuses a lot of his actors that he likes to work with in some of these movies. And you'll pick up what those are if you are a Tarantino fan. If you've seen all the other movies, you'll pick them up much more easily. If you're more like me, where I've seen a few, but I want to consider myself a fan, I had to go back and find them all because it was interesting. It was definitely interesting. So I thought it was a good movie. I liked all three. This week. All right, that's it. That's all I've got for Monday Movie Minute this week. There are new podcast episodes. Yes, I said plural, episodes, coming on Thursday. It's going to be another one of my little mini series of episodes that I put out. It's a 4-part series talking about the 4 parks at Walt Disney World. This is not a how to tour these parks. This is us fangirling what we love about each distinct park at Walt Disney World Resort. We are going to talk about each one of them separately, and I don't know, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to have these discussions with people who feel very strongly about a specific park for different reasons. Don't forget to subscribe and throw those 5-star reviews up there. I really appreciate it. And we actually had a couple of reviews that came in over this last week. And I just wanted to tell you guys, I do read them, and I really appreciate you taking that extra time to give that feedback. I think it does help other fangirls maybe find us a little bit. So I see there's one here from Dawn. I see there's one here from @TwistedLime. I appreciate y'all. And let me know if there's anything else I can fangirl for you. I will warn you guys though, for probably this next month, we're going to be pretty Disney heavy because D23 Expo is coming up. And if you want to know a little bit about D23 Expo, there is an episode from last week that you can go find and listen to that talks a little bit about that. But what D23 Expo is, short version, is it is the big Disney fan con. It's like Comic-Con for Disney fans, right? And all the movies, all the TV news, all of the Disney parks news, basically all of the things that Patty loves are going to be discussed at this 3-day event. And I'm going to be there. And I'm so excited about it. So just a warning, I have a few episodes that were going to come up leading up into it. And then probably while I'm there, I am going to try to put out some immediate information for those that are following along at home. I hope you will. And all right, guys, that's it. I am going to go ahead and sign off. Thanks for fangirling with me on the No Guilt Fangirls podcast. Hope you'll be back to fangirl with us again real soon.